Y'all, y'all know they say if you want to hide something from us to put it in the book, right? Because we don't like to read, but that stops today. It's too much information out here for us to continue to be bamboozled and just led by people who have other motives. And so, what I want to talk about is sensationalism in Hollywood. And the Woman King movie, I almost got caught up in the sensationalism because what I see powerful black women. And I love to see powerful black women. I celebrate powerful black women. I am a powerful black woman. Um, that's my jam. You know what I'm saying? So when I saw the preview for the movie, I got excited. But myself said, dig a little bit deeper. I need you to dig a little bit deeper. And in my research, I've been researching all week, and I'm still researching the Dahomey people, the Dahomey Amazons, which this movie is based on, an elite regiment of the army that were all female. And doing my digging, I learned some things that just made me feel a certain kind of way. And I'm going to share them. The first thing that I learned was that the Dahomey people had a lot to do with the transatlantic slave trade of our ancestors. They say up to 20% of our enslaved ancestors came by way of them, them defeating fellow nearby tribes and trading them off for tobacco and alcohol and guns and stuff like that. So just so you know what I'm saying? We tend to be emotional type people, and we get caught up in the excitement, in the momentum, which is wonderful. You know what I'm saying? Because I love to see us powerful when so often we are not seen as powerful. But there's more to this story than you see on the preview is all I want to let you know. I want to encourage you to do your own research and let's have a conversation. This is only part one. I got so much to say about this. Peace. Hey y'all, today we are talking about how the Minos came to be. The Minos, also known as the Dahomey Amazons, that was the name given by the colonizers. But we're going to talk about how they came to be. Now, the Minos were a part of the Dahomey Kingdom. The Dahomey Kingdom existed in present-day Benin in between the 1600s and the late 1800s. Okay, so let's get into it. And I'm gonna step out the way so y'all can see the pictures. So in the 1600s, there was a king by the name of Wagbaja. And Wagbaja had an all-female unit of huntresses called Gabeto. And these are them up top picture. All right. And then in the 1700s, there was a king by the name of Agaja. And King Agaja in the palace, he always surrounded himself with a unit of female bodyguards. They were his security. Okay. All right, let me step out the way. Now, when you look at the bottom, you're going to see King Gizo. In the 1800s, he's the one that integrated them into the army. So it was a natural evolution from these three reigns that the Minos came to be in the Dahomey Kingdom. And that's all I'm going to say for now. I'm going to continue this conversation Monday. There's more layers to this story. It gets a little gory. It gets a little dark. But it is what it is. Peace, y'all. Before I can explain who the Minos, also known as the Dahomey Amazons, are, I have to explain who the Dahomey people are. They were formed by a mixture of various local ethnic groups on the Obambe Plain, the Fon people, and they were possibly forced there due to slave trade. During that time, it was a bunch of tribes and kingdoms that were actually raiding each other's territory in exchange for slaves, so they can trade them to Europeans. So they came together on the strength of survival, security, and expansion. So they established a very strict military. Um, they were small, but they were very skilled because they were ironsmiths. So they were good at making things out of metal, like the swords and the machetes and the spears and things like that. So the first king, Hogbaja, he began raiding and taking over towns outside of the Obome Plateau. In the 1700s, King Agaja took over Alada and Weda. These were two of the major slave trading kingdoms of the coast, and they became a major part of the transatlantic slave trade. In 1729, Agaja started a war with the Oyo Empire. The Oyo are the Yoruban people. While this was happening, the Wada, who they had took over previously, they assumed that they were weakened because they were at war with the Oyo and returned to reclaim their empire. King Agaja of the Dahomey, he proved them wrong when he brought his army in with women warriors in the back, dressed like men. These were the Minos. The king of the Oyo, or Yoruban, he said this about the Dahomey people. The king has said that Dahomey is an enemy of all the world, and that his chiefs must use as much force in killing an ant as they would kill an elephant, for the small things bring on the large ones. The king has said that the Dahomeans are a warrior people. So, in 1730, the war ended with the Oyo, and Dahomey retained domestic control of their empire but became a tributary of the Oyo Empire. That means that they were subordinate to the Oyo, and they had to pay them slaves because the Yorubans had conquered them. So in 1818, they expanded and were able to gain their freedom from the Oyo, and they vowed to never be oppressed again. This is how. In 1730, the war ended with the Oyo. Remember, these are the Yoruban people. And Dahomey retained domestic control of their empire, but they became a tributary of the Oyo Empire. Tributary means that it was a subordinate state that functioned over a major state. So Oyo was the major state, and Dahomey was underneath them because Oyo had conquered them. So in order for them to be a tributary state, they had to pay Oyo. They had to pay tribute to them, and they did that in slaves and in other ways. So in 1818, they expanded, the Dahomey expanded and were able to gain control from the Oyo Empire. They vowed to never be oppressed again. One of the kings of the Yoruban people, the Oyo Empire, this is what he said about the Dahomey. The king has said that Dahomey is an enemy of all the world, and that his chiefs must use as much force in killing an ant as they would to kill an elephant, for the small things bring on the large ones. The king has said that the Dahomeans are a warrior people, and they were. Even though they were small at the time, they were very powerful because they were skilled ironsmiths. So they were good at making machetes and spears and things like that. The requirements to be a Mino, also known as Dahomey Amazon. Number one, you could not be married. You were considered to be married to the king. Therefore, you were under the protection of the throne. Number two, no children. You couldn't have any children. Number three, you had to go through insensitivity training. an example of that, and it's documented. You can go research this. They had to throw prisoners of war that were from other African kingdoms. They would lift them up into like this boat-like apparatus, and they would toss them over to death, to fatal death. And they had to do that to show that they did not have attachment to life. And I'm sorry, that kind of gets to me, that they did not have attachment to life, and they just were not attached to anything. The next thing was they had to go through like 10-day Hunger Game type initiations. Like they would be put in the jungle for like 10 days with just a machete, and they would have to survive. Now, some of them volunteered to be a Dahomey Amazon, but others were actually volunteered by their husband. Like if their husband was like, you know, my wife is unruly, the king would put her in the Dahomey Amazon. Now, let's talk about the benefits of being a Dahomey Amazon. They, like I told you before, they were under the protection of the king. So, for example, anytime they walked out of the palace, they all had slaves too. Anytime they walked out of the palace, they would have a slave to ring the bell, and that told men especially, don't look, cast your eyes down, look away, and if you touch her, that's like death on spot. They had access to all the alcohol and the tobacco that they were trading with Europeans. It was a social status, you know, in the kingdom. It was high social status. So they got to engage and participate in a lot of the kingdom's day-to-day happenings and activities, and they were respected. Their trademark was decapitation. There's a story of where one of the Dahomey, the Mino or Dahomey Amazon, young girl, she was like 16 years old, she decapitated a captive, and upon decapitating the captive, she wiped the blood from the machete and she swallowed it. On top of that, the Dahomey people, they had these ceremonies. One was called the watering of the graves, and one was called death of a royal. And during these times, they actually sacrificed the captives and the war criminals. They sacrificed them, they killed them. And the number is up to the thousands. So I understand self-preservation. I get that, and I understand that is why and how the Dahomey came about. If you research their history, I will not be celebrating the Dahomey Amazons or the Minos or the women that are depicted in the movie Woman King, because they were brutal, ruthless people, and they allowed their power to turn into greed, and they became bloodthirsty into where they were vibrating on the lowest frequency. So anytime that you can just kill people that look like you and sell them off to slavery for money and power, I got a big issue with that. And I want to say this because I like to be responsible when I speak upon certain things. But in 1999, the president of Benin, President Kirikou, he actually apologized to African-American clergy. And since that time, they have been traveling the U.S. to offer their regrets and to seek reconciliation. So I don't want it to be like this division, but I also think it's very necessary for us to know the real stories. And like I said initially at the beginning of, my ranting about this movie, is to not get caught up in the sensationalism. So these are the reasons why I will not be glorifying these women or celebrating.